welcome back to Joking Apart. Yes, the podcast that tries to bash down Stuart Goldsmith's podcast, but also wants to interview Stuart Goldsmith so the comedy works because I'm a rival, an enemy, but also I want to interview him. So it's like a fight. But today we're back doing more interviews. Yes, Joking Apart is back, and it'll never go away. It will never die unless I decide to cancel it, and then it will die. So let's crack on. My guest today is best known for appearing in both some episodes of the radio version and some episodes of the more late night TV version of Breaking the News. It's one and only Alistair Barrie.
Hola, hello, it's Alistair Barrie and also Asteroid the kitten, who I am having to look after this morning. So I apologise in advance for any wow, purring, screaming, or general cat sounds. I hope that's okay.
All right. So we shall start at the very beginning because Julie Andrews once said it was a good place to start, and the whole time I've used her philosophy, it's not been wrong. How did you get into the world of ha 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 comedy?
The world of ha 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 comedy. Basically, I was trying to be an actor. I went to drama school. I'd always done quite a lot of public speaking and stuff. I did the debating competition at school. I went to high school in the States for a bit, and I remember giving a speech there when I left, and the English teacher said to me, "You could have charged for that." And I thought, that's an idea. And yeah, so basically, I was an actor, an out of work actor. With a predilection for stand up. Didn't know how you did it, but I worked not far from the old comedy cafe in Rivington Street. And I used to go down there on a Wednesday and watch the new acts. And then I decided I could do it just as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned there of having a stint in American school. Did you notice when you think about it now, do you notice how different the education was between when you were being taught stuff in the UK to between when you were being taught stuff in the States?
Well, actually, the most interesting thing about education in the States that I found was that it was much wider, which is not perhaps what you would expect me to say. But because we specialised quite early, I mean, I was the last year that did O levels.
Yeah.
But then you go, I was 15 when I chose my A levels, which is quite a big moment to choose kind of your life direction. And then I went to America for a term and we did public speaking, I did marine biology, I did psychology, I did English literature. And the thing was, like, my first lesson, I remember we sat down, they were talking about Beowulf, and I was late to the class because I hadn't had a visa. So school was already a term in, sorry, a week in. And I sat down and they said some stuff about Beowulf, which I happened to know was absolute bollocks because I'd done an extended dissertation style essay on Beowulf. So I think the first thing I did was a 10-minute monologue on Beowulf, at which point I turned around and the entire class was looking at me going, bloody hell. But no, I had a tremendous time over there. They do a wider range of subjects in perhaps less detail. And I think it's safe to say, looking at the political regime over there now, a lot of them don't seem to do any education at all.
And keeping on the political side, but one of the things you've worked on that now speaking to a lot of people in that realm, and I understand why you would air one thing on the radio at 1:30 and air it like close to midnight on TV, even though it's the same product. What would it like working on both the TV and radio versions of the brilliant Scottish panel show Breaking the News?
Um, But it's great. I mean, I did I think I did all the first 10 series, and then to be honest, it's quite a long way to go. And I love going up. I mean, I'm going up to Scotland on Thursday to do a gig, but uh to be honest, there's not a great deal of difference. It's not really like if you do something like what else was I trying to think of? Like any kind of TV, like be it breakfast TV where you're sort of shuffled in there, or a panel show where there's lots of breaks and a warm up. With Breaking the News, it was a lot more, right, here's the show, off you go. Because it had a basis in radio, it was quite easy to transfer it to telly. To be honest, what they did was point cameras at the radio version. So, with the slight exception of thinking I better make a bit more effort in what I choose to wear, there wasn't a great deal of difference. But both a lot of fun to do. It's a bit like if you go to, I've done in Northern Ireland, they have a show called The Blame
Yeah,
Game, which started on the radio,
brilliant.
and I did that on the radio, and that was great. And then I did it on TV, and it was very much like a camera stuck in a black box with and then they got a lot of money from BBC Ulster, and suddenly it was Warm Up Guy and Razzmatazz and Paddy Kilty, and three Irish people speaking far too fast for me to get a word in edgeways.
Yeah, and but the thing that I've always noticed, and it still baffles me, is when you watch the radio version, when you listen to the radio version, is the correct term, and then you watch the TV version. Now knowing that the exact same version, just one you can just add a swear word in the radio version. Why do you think that the TV version airs so late in the evening rather than the general 9 p.m. slot that you would get a Have I Got News for You?
Is that for breaking the news?
Yes, correct.
I have to be honest. I'm not even sure if I've watched it, so I didn't even know that it came out late. I think because it's BBC Scotland, and it's because it's prime time in Scotland. The radio is, but it's not. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I didn't know it came out. The TV show came out later. I guess, like everything else, there is a slight element that you can say a bit more.
Yeah,
But maybe I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of BBC Scotland and the editorial process too well to comment, I'm afraid.
yeah. Well, it's that some episodes, depending on what you watch, whether or not you're watching a series or you're watching a special, it could air at like 11:30 in the evening. And I'm not too sure who's still knocking about at 11:30 in the evening wanting to
Well,
watch that.
I think that's the thing about modern broadcast. I mean, the thing is, TV, when I started, it was about trying to get on TV, and it just isn't anymore because people don't watch TV like they used to. Back in the day, an appearance on Have I Got News for You in the late 90s was like, right, cha-ching, I'm on to touring. Now, I mean, I've not done Have I Got News for You. I think I've written for it, and funnily enough, I had an audition for Have I Got News for You, which I think was the 23rd of March, 2020, which, if you remember, around that time, something else also happened and everything was cancelled. So, I, yeah, I mean, now everything is very much more online. You can say whatever you want, which has its downfalls as well. Although, according to reform, of course, you can't say anything these days. But yeah, I think the bottom line is you can be a bit ruder. The edit can be a bit more tackle some other subjects. But again, the thing about all of these things is you are always totally enthralled to the editor. And I mean, I've done shows where I've come away going, I'm pretty sure I smashed that. And it's come back and I've gone, they left out the four applause breaks. Similarly, I'm sure there are ones where I've thought, God, I wasn't very good there. And they managed to squeeze in the best bits. So you're never sure.
Yeah. And why do you think that as of now, in this day and age, why do you think there's less panel shows airing across TV?
Well, very simple answer. Like with most things, is they're quite expensive to make. And the format, it's very difficult to do a format that's anything other than, I mean, especially in terms of topical news, it's going to be a bunch of people sitting around saying, aren't the government awful? And they usually have a bit of a lefty slant because that's how comics are. I was asked to do one on a well-known right-wing channel. And they admitted to me that basically they'd completely copied Have I Got News for You? And I looked at it and went, no, because A, I didn't want to appear on that channel, but also, slightly more importantly, they didn't have the money to make it look good. And it was going to just look very amateurish, and I didn't have any interest, full stop. Um, they are to do them well, like anything, like a good panel show, like a Would I Lie to You, or uh, 8 out of 10 cats, I suppose, as a cat crawls up my leg, is is basically. I don't know if you're going to video this as well, but that is the ninth out of 10 cats. Come on, Astrid, down you get. And you need a hook. You need a hook. So, Have I Got News for You is Ian and Paul being witty about the news. Would I Lie to You is kind of a parlor game. If you've got a hook, that's fine. But you still need good writers, good presenters, a proper TV crew who can catch everything. And it's a big setup.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is I mean, we're on a podcast now. Everything these days is podcasts. And I mean, I used to do a podcast with James O'Brien and Nick Revell called No Pressure to Be Funny, which was very successful, but it was before we realized you could turn successful podcasts into, before James Acaster and Ed Gamble became millionaires, basically. And we did it as a live show, and it was really quite hard work, and we wanted to pay people, so we charged the audience, but everyone was making 20 quid a head from it. And we stopped doing it because we all had other things on. But having said that, it was one of the top 10 podcasts in the Observer the week we decided to stop it.
Wow.
And if we'd known that we could literally, I mean, we had good download figures and all that sort of thing. If I'd known, poor little techno pillock that I am, if I'd known, I could have just said to all the listeners, could you each give us a fiver? And they'd have gone, oh God, yeah, to carry on. I would probably be sitting in a slightly larger house right now, but that is the nature of the world, is it not?
Yeah. And you're right that a lot of podcasts now are these big things, and people like Richard Herring and realizing you can get money from it. And he's moving from an attic to a basement, so I don't know if that's the correct decision he's made with the money, gone from his office in a basement in an attic. Now it looks like a basement. It probably isn't a basement when you watch the videos of him talking to himself at home, which he does quite a lot.
Mm.
He blamed it on a puppet, but it is talking to
Well,
himself.
this is the man who plays snooker with himself, after
Yeah,
all. So let's be honest.
yeah,
But I think the thing is, I mean, another good example of that though is Dan Nightingale and Adam Rowe with Have a Word Pod. And to their credit, I mean, Dan was always, always sort of turning up at gigs with a microphone and stuff, and they learned how to do it. I was busy not learning how to do it, being, I was like, I'm at a show, I'm doing my show. Dan always had his eye on uh, other things. And the thing is, like anything, if I learning and the experience, if I'd known more about podcasting, I wouldn't have stopped doing my podcast.
yeah,
And Dan, when they plowed all the money back into it, which is the first thing I think a good podcast does.
yeah,
And you build a studio, because basically what you're doing is what TV companies used to do, which is why, to go back to your previous question, they don't make them anymore, because there's people at home. Basically, the technology is good enough now to get pretty close yourself. And then you can take the money when it comes in, as opposed to having to start with fees and agents and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, a lot of it is getting more professional, and it depends what podcast you do. But yeah, I think plowing stuff back in, and obviously when I speak to you again in about 5 years' time, there won't be a Minecraft sword on the wall. There'll be obviously the big glitzy lights of Las Vegas.
and you're right that TV companies aren't funneling enough money into these things, and you can sort of see that in America with the Dropout stuff, and they're like a company that was started on YouTube, and they made like different. I wouldn't say panel shows. I would say like game shows where they take it too seriously. But some of them have gone on to be on SNL now, and it's because they've funneled the money directly in. And you're right. Do you think that the way that entertainment is going, do you think that more people will just create their own streaming services and they will?
Well, I think that has to be the case because the technology is so advanced. I mean, I'm sitting down with you with a very posh microphone that I bought for voiceovers that I would never have bought 15 years ago, because I would go into a studio to do voiceovers. And we're doing a podcast. I've got home recording, and I'm the least technical person you have ever met. So inevitably, there's going to be more stuff produced by people because of the level of technology. And the thing is, it doesn't really matter what I or anyone else thinks. It's although having said all this about the technology, the cat is about to chew through my headphones, so I'm just going to pop her down again. Sorry. The thing about it's not up to me to say what's entertaining. If you do something and you find an audience, I mean, I did a joke Instagram reel the other day about me unboxing a pint can of Guinness because they'd started doing pint cans, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh, this is my first ever unboxing video." Because to me, the idea of a video channel where you unpack goods is the most bizarrely
yeah,
tedious thing I've ever heard, but it's incredibly popular, and you can't knock something's popularity. Doesn't I mean? I can knock Donald Trump's popularity for very different reasons, but you can't dispute the popularity, is my point.
yeah,
And I think with the problem I have with, and I think most comedians have with the online thing, is the people who become well known online without it's nothing to do with paying your dues. I was talking to someone, quite a well-known podcaster, about this last night. It's not about paying your dues. And, if you haven't stopped at Wrexham services at 3 in the morning for a Ginster's pasty, then you haven't learnt comedy. No, basically, if you haven't learnt how to do comedy, and that can be anything, there's certain people who shall remain nameless, mainly because I don't know them, who get lots of YouTube followers or Instagram followers and then book a live tour. And I mean, I know comics who've turned up and met them and gone, "Oh, what's the show?" And they've gone, "Oh, I don't really know,"
Yeah,
because they haven't done live work. Whereas someone like me can stand anywhere from a fringe show to a West End theatre to pretty much an arena, and you'll be pretty guaranteed that I'll do a good show because I've got 25 years experience.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think there is a problem with technology is a great leveler,
yeah,
but it also means there's an enormous amount out there.
yeah. And you sort of get it that when you look at these people that think, oh, they'll go and do these tours. There's one example that I can give that where you see it happen, where because he's mentioned it previously that it works. So Fosh is a great example because he was doing comedy beforehand and then went to
Who
you
was that? Sorry, Matt.
Fosh.
Do I
Fosh.
know him? He's not the crowd work guy. Who am I thinking of?
It,
Matt Ridge.
well, Max Fosh is the one that went to I think it's like Iceland to cook a curry in a volcano.
Oh well, that's see, I mean, that's an interesting thing to do, isn't it? But there is that kid, the very sort of TV friendly looking American kid. I think is it Matt Ridge or Matt Rife or something, who, oh, here's my sixth video of the year. It's 2 hours of crowd work, and you're like, good God, really? Write some jokes, mate. And I've watched some of his stand up, and it's extremely route one. But then you get someone like over here, like I worked with him for the first time the other day, Jack Skipper, who's gone really big really quickly, and he's really good.
Yeah,
So that's fine. And I mean, I was giving this example last night. There's I can't pronounce his name, but Munya Chawana, is it? I think
yeah,
brilliant black. I don't know if he is black. Is he mixed race? I don't know. It doesn't. Not that it matters at all," said Alistair, catching his woke self out horribly. But he's brilliant. His
yeah,
videos, his sketches are brilliant. But a friend of mine, Dave Johns, who's a very well-known, established now film star comedian, was doing the stand Newcastle, and Munya was there in the dressing room and was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm on first." And Dave's like, "Oh right, well you've been going long." I guess, "Well, I've got this tour coming up, so I wanted to sort of thought I'd better learn how to do it." And you think, good, because that's what you should do. And that shows that he's a quality operator
yeah.
because he's not taking his audience. Oh, sorry, I just got absolutely mullered by the cat. He's not taking it's probably for going black or mixed race. How dare you? I'm black and white. Um, no, he's taking his audience seriously. He's got a tour, and so he's learning how to do stand up because he's sensible and bright enough to know that you don't just turn up and do it.
Yeah,
And I mean, there's a very well-known club in at Manchester that stopped booking TikTok acts because literally people were turning up and going, "Do you remember this?" and holding up their phone.
yeah,
So, I mean, similarly, I was supporting Jonathan Pye
yeah,
a while
yeah,
back, who's wonderful. But Jonathan, Tom is his name, is an actor who came up with the character. So if he gets heckled, for instance, he finds it quite difficult because basically someone's interrupted his script.
yeah,
And I went on and someone heckled and I dealt with it immediately. And then I did a call back and then I got a round of applause and I came off and he was like, "Bloody hell." And I said, "Well, that's 25 years of club comedy.
yeah,
Club comics are very good at that sort of thing. Could I write the show that he wrote and which I saw get a deserved standing ovation at the Bloomsbury Theatre? I couldn't have written that show, but it was brilliant." And he said to me, he said, "Oh, I think, Circuit looked down on, they don't like me as that YouTube guy." And I was like, "That's absolute rubbish. We don't, no one gives where you come from as long as you can do the goods."
yeah,
It's when you see someone who sort of swans into a dressing room because they've got, 1 million followers and then goes out and walks on stage and does, like, for instance, Dapper Laugh's original tour of basically walking out and calling women slags and doing half an hour of crowd work. You know,
yeah.
that's not comedy.
And the name Devil Laughs isn't a good comedy name at all
Well, I
because
believe I believe he is back. I
oh
believe because he came when basically I mean he would, I imagine, argue he was one of the first victims of cancel culture. I think most comedians would argue he was a victim of not really having done any comedy. But then he sort of turned up on lots of sort of serious programs in a black polo neck going, it was a character, and and I think, and then obviously realised that that wasn't going to get him very wealthy. So he's come back as Dapper, probably, I imagine, with more experience. Someone told me they did, was it a Butlins or something with him the other day?
Wow.
Well, no, Butlins is all right. I do Butlins. They do these weekenders, which is what's basically kept Butlins going, and they depend very what the kind of gig you have
Yeah.
depends very much on the weekender. Like if it's a 90s weekender, it's going to be, people a little bit younger than me, but generally up for it. If it's a Northern Soul one, it tends to be quite a lot of elderly racist mods on speed, which is a bit ironic. But someone had said Dapper laughs there, and they loved him. And you know what? Again, you can't
No.
argue with what is popular. I mean, you can. I mean, you can certainly have an opinion as
Yeah.
a professional. There's
Yeah.
a one of the biggest selling comedians in this country who's convinced he's very, very good at comedy, isn't.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name him because I can't be bothered to get into, oh, he picked up on this. But he never had to earn his stripes.
Yeah.
And if you can still sell tickets without having to earn your stripes, it's a
Yeah.
great place to be, but it's not great comedy
Yeah.
usually.
And you don't really see those for the Butlin now that like Dapper Laughs, The Masked Singer, and then Stephen Mulhern. You don't really get that in the
There's not a huge crossover there, no.
no, no. But going back in time slightly, but what was the comedy circuit, which is never actually a circle, but what is the comedy circuit like when you first joined said comedy circuit?
Well, it's funny you should say it's like a circle, but it's not a circle at all, because in many ways it really is. I mean, but having said that, in a good way, I suddenly realized last week that I hadn't put any gigs in at Headliners in Chiswick and the Banana Cabaret, which are two clubs I've been playing for 25 years. So I literally sent both promoters texts going, can we put a weekend in? And they went, yeah, there you go. And that there is a circular element to that, but they're great clubs run by lovely people, and I will always play them. Even, I mean, and part of that is if you ever do get to the stage that you can. I mean, I tour, but I only tour on a fairly small level. But if I'm playing the Apollo, I will still go down to Headliners on a Saturday night to try stuff out. Um, but I think the biggest change in the circuit, I think the biggest change is there's more comics, to be honest. I think there's more diversity, which is a good thing. Many would argue that the positive discrimination has not necessarily reflected the quality of the acts, but that's because you don't get good until you practice. So there's less middle-aged white men around because new ones are coming through and they're learning their trade. And also, you learn your trade off those who've gone before and done it better. And if you don't have role models who are your demographic, your sexuality, your gender, then you're less likely to learn from the those that went before. I think being an open spot now, a new act is really tough because there used to be a more established sort of ladder, and you do the comedy calf and you do the chuckle club, and then you go, right, I think I'm ready to go and do the comedy store, and then you do five at the comedy store, and if it went really well you got a 10, and if it went really well a couple of times you might get a 20, and if that, it was a kind of hierarchy. The problem you have, really, especially if you're a new act now, is there's a lot of very experienced circuit headliners like me who are, I will open one gig, might even stop somewhere in the middle and do another show. I don't think much about doing three shows in a night,
Yeah.
which doesn't leave much space for the new act who hasn't proven themselves.
Hmm.
But people find a way. Hence, we come back to the internet. Loads of people. When I started,
Yeah.
actually, now I think about your question more fully. I think the biggest change is when I started, the comedians were all standing at the back going, "Oh, did you do this? Did you?" Yeah. Now they're all jostling for space to see who can put their tripod in the best, most advantageous spot. And I think it's I'm not criticizing it at all. It's the way to get going. But at the same time, the amount of time they must spend editing and trying to find the right clip, doing shit crowd work. I mean, funny enough, I put a crowd work clip up today just because it was a really funny little moment at the Comedy Store a couple of weeks ago. I was MC and I said to someone, "What's your name?" And she said, "Louder." And I went, "What's your name?" And it was just a silly thing, but it was a great tiny bit of crowd work. Lots of people now think crowd work is what to do. Having said all that, one of the best things you can do as a stand-up is go over your sets, because then you find new avenues, new thought processes. new jokes just come to mind. So for all that people might go, oh, they're just editing videos, well, they're watching themselves doing stand up. So it's quite a good learning tool as well.
Yeah,
But yeah, the biggest change is you were trying to get up the circuit ladder.
yeah,
Now I think it's much more likely you're trying to get up the internet ladder.
yeah. And you mentioned there about crowd work, and I think I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard a really good sort of statement that Paul Smith, who seems to be a quite well known Liverpudlian comedian, um,
Very, very well known these
yeah,
days.
he had said that someone came to his show was disappointed because they'd only seen him do the crowd work stuff and thought that's what his show was because that's what he puts out. And I thought that was really fascinating because that is true. People assume from what they see is what they're going to get.
Paul is a very good friend of mine and he's an excellent comic. He's also really quite big now. And he's a very good example of how the game has changed because Hot Water Comedy Club, which he is represented by, has always worked with. I mean, if you turn up at Hot Water and he's not MC, back in the day, because it was a great club. The old the last two venues were great clubs, but they were quite small, which is why you were doing 4 shows a night, and everyone was coming down to see Paul Smith. And you do 3 shows in a night to 200 people each time, and if Paul Smith wasn't comparing, you could literally feel the audience. I mean, we've all been there when they think someone's going to be there, and get a Brighton and Stephen Grant's not comparing or whatever. But with Paul, it was literally I mean, someone come into the dressing room to complain that they'd not been allowed in to see the first bit of Paul Smith, and my daughter's got 250,000 followers on Instagram. We're going to complain on it. Oh, go on, fill your boots, mate. But I think the problem Paul has now is that he's got so big
Yeah,
that he goes and plays big stadiums or certainly big theatres. And does he want to go and do 4 shows a night at Hot Water? No, because it's bloody hard work. And if you can go and earn, frankly, you know, 50 times the money doing one show.
yeah,
But also the problem I think, and I've not spoken to him about this, but I imagine it's probably the case, is there's a lot of stuff of him online and it's all crowd
yeah,
work.
yeah,
And it's so expected of him that, and there is a reason you write stand up, and Paul writes great stand up. But as it is, he has to go, oh, all right, mate, what's your name? Where are you from? And I mean, there's a very funny story about a comedian turning up at Hot Water to MC, not being Paul, walked on and went, all right, how are you? Hello, mate, what's your name? Steve. What do you do, Steve? And someone at the back went, hey, that's Paul Smith's material. And you're like, no, no, it isn't. No, but that's one of the wonderful things about stand-up. People don't know what stand-up's like.
yeah,
If you come to a club, the amount of times people have come up to me afterwards and gone, I've never been to a stand-up club before. That was amazing. Because we have to make sure that we're banging it out. You've never heard of me. I'm on stage headlining the biggest comedy store, the biggest comedy club in the country, or, the comedy store or Hot Water or one of the Glees. I've got to be on it for 20 minutes and bang, 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 bang. So when I come off, people are going, or any of the people who play that level, we've got to be really bloody good to hit that. And so people go, my God, that was amazing. I mean, all I've ever seen is, and it's so different watching a DVD or watching internet clips. I mean, the funniest thing about internet clips is it's not often the stand up that really, I mean, if you ask a proper influencer or Instagram consultant, which there are many now, and some of them charge eye-watering amounts. They'll be like, "Oh no, it's got to be under 30 seconds," and if you haven't got them in the first 4 seconds, and always best to put it on at 8 o'clock in the morning because that's when the most people are commute. And you're going, but this routine has got a callback like 4 minutes in that I need to set up. No, people people's attention spans are not up to it.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think Paul's a great comic, and good luck to him. And he has, in many ways, revolutionized how people approach comedy. And as with every revolution, there are very good bits and very, very less good bits,
yeah,
shall we say?
yeah,
But yeah, he's. What's interesting about Paul now that he's big, I sort of hear more people going, "Oh God, it's that crowd work bloke," and it's like, no, it's the guy who, worked a long time at Hot Water, getting really, really good.
yeah.
And again, we come back to my first point, which is he's selling enough tickets. You can't argue with his popularity.
And one of the things you've worked on is seen in the eyes of many. as a juggernaut and seen as the eyes of the few as something they've heard of, but they're not too sure what on earth they're on about. But what was it like writing additional material for the incredible The Now Show?
For the Now Show, that was quite interesting because it was one of those shows. I'll be honest with you, I've always been slightly irritated I wasn't asked to go and do to appear on it. I'm a topical comic, and I think it's safe to say. I mean, the news quiz is another one that they've asked for my availability, and I've never done it. And I'm kind of like, especially when I did Breaking the News, I was like, well, they keep asking me back, so I can't be terrible.
Yeah,
But I mean, the funny thing about working on those shows is that you are with proper writers. Now, I've written for lots of people, but quite often it's like, one friend in particular, I'll go and see his show and I'll think up some jokes and we'll basically sit and have a pint afterwards and go through it. And I'll go, oh, what about this? And basically feed them things for them to then work into their own voice. Um, when you're working with proper writers for shows who don't feel the burning need to satisfy their ego by actually standing up and showing off, they're machines. I mean, I did the Now Show. There was one guy whose name I forget, but he literally, I turned out two sides of A4 on a topic and thinking, oh, that's some pretty good stuff there. But also some of it was a bit long-winded because I'd go, oh, I'll set that up there, and then yeah, and you go, no, it's gag, gag, gag. We've got 30 minutes, and we've got 8 writers, and this lad, I mean, he'd come up with, I think he'd done 10 pages of just pure gags, and you go, wow. And I don't write like that.
yeah,
I can't write like that. I don't think. Um, because which is why I'm a performer first, probably, and a writer second. And all the things I write tend to be not stand up,
yeah,
if you see what I mean. I don't sit down and write stand up, for instance. Most stand up is almost all the stand up I write is notes transformed into performance honed on stage.
yeah,
And that's a very different skill from literally sitting at a laptop, like a ticker tape machine, spilling out. And, often, I think the other thing is the idea that if you're going to say it, it's got to be good,
mm,
right? Whereas if you're just a writer, you go, well, if I spill out 20 of these, three are good,
yeah,
that's a decent hit rate. Whereas I'm going, if I spill out 20 of these and three are good, I would have been booed off before 5 minutes. So it's a different approach, and one I have an enormous amount of admiration for, but not one. I mean, when I'm asked to write, I will write, but there are certainly people with a much more skilled. Their skill set is much more kind of gag, 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 gag than mine.
yeah. And one of the other things you've worked on was very well known in its sense of it's very well known for the press to think fans have said something about the program, but they really haven't said the thing about the program. What was it like working on an episode of the sadly missed and should return Frankie Boyle's New World Order?
Oh, that was. Do you know what? What was it like? It was like sitting in a hotel room for 8 hours typing. Bless him. Frankie's an old friend of mine, and to be honest, I sent him an email going, "Oh, you've got a new series. Do you want a writer? Because you make your own work in this job." And Frankie came back and went, "Oh, yeah, that'd be lovely. Try this." And I think I wrote on literally the last one of the last series, and bless him, he's a lovely man, Frankie. And you want to be conscientious, even
Yeah,
if it's a friend. And so I remember because I was at a hotel in Nottingham, and I literally got up, as you have to do if you're charging, essentially office hours.
yeah,
It's traditional to work office hours. So I was up at 9 o'clock and I was writing all morning, and then I did this, and he'd said, "I'll pay you this for half day and that for a full day." Uh, and then I sent him a load of stuff at lunchtime, and then sat down and started writing again. He came back. He went, "Look, we've got loads this week, so half day's cool. Is that all right with you?" And I went, "Oh yeah, all right. Well, here's another hour I've just done, but don't worry about paying me for it because it's nice." So in turn, I'd love to be able to say, we sat in the writers' room and we threw ideas around, and then Frankie had this great idea, and I went, "What about this?" But it wasn't. It was me looking at the topics, sat in front of a computer, and writing stuff that I hope would work. I mean, the one I've written for most probably is Mock the Week. And again, that's the thing about Mock the Week is it was very formulaic, especially early days. It was, you know, it would be like Russell would look cute, then Dara would be a witty host, and then Hugh Dennis would, be Hugh Dennis, and Frankie Boyle would then say something absolutely appalling, and everyone would kind of go, "Oh my God," right, and try and top it. But as it progressed, it became. I mean, I wrote for a lot of people on it, and it was a good show. But it's that ridiculous idea that there weren't writers,
Yeah,
so everyone employed their own writer, and you were given. It was the same, the world's worst, and so the jokes that didn't make it last week, you slightly change and crowbar into next week, and that was much more of a gag thing
yeah,
because it wasn't so many of these shows. They're not places where you can do an extended monologue.
yeah,
And I mean, that's one of the things about the topical podcast I had with James O'Brien, is it was called No Pressure to Be Funny, so that we could look at issues in greater depth. It was basically inspired by Mock the Week, because Mock the Week wasn't like, what do you think of, the Obama presidency? It was like, how soon can we get a knob gag into this?
yeah. And I think that Mock the Week had that sense of you had the bit where at the end that were really easily shareable. That when the BBC thought let's do that, they would just that's all you would see for the next 4 years was those clips of things you
They
want
clip it. And
whatever.
the money, this is again, you come back to the money. The money now, I was talking to Gary Delaney about this because I mean, Gary's a lovely man and a great comic. And the thing about being a one-liner merchant is that's great for the way the world's gone because it's a gag. There you go. It's the downside is extremely easy to steal the jokes. Just ask Tim Vine or Gary, or Jimmy, but Jimmy's more likely to nick them. Sorry, did I say that out loud? And well, no, Jimmy's got arrangements that anyone who writes anything for him, it's then his, because Jimmy's one of the most powerful men in comedy. So slagging him off is probably not a good idea. But I have known him for over 25 years, so I think he'll probably take it in the spirit it's intended. But uh, Gary was saying to me that he makes a certain amount of money from his YouTube channel, not a lot, but a few hundred quid a month. But actually, the companies that own the rights to Live at the Apollo and Mock the Week, that's where they make their money because it's clips and the online advertising. And so much of the industry is still sort of stuck in this mindset that, oh, if I do this really well and then I'll get on here. And people go, how good your comedy is. This person's got 250,000 followers. So when they share this clip that we've put up, his 250,000 followers look at it, I get the money. And I call me a woke, lefty, rabble rousing revolutionary, but I slightly object to the fact that the people making the money are not the people producing the product. But of course, they would argue they are the people producing the product.
Yeah. And one of the other things you've worked on, and the person that was the head honcho of the program now does the odd programs where no one's really watching it because it's like at like 2 o'clock in the morning waiting for the new episode of
God,
whatever.
I keep on trying to sort of second guess who you're about to ask me
Well,
about, so that I don't upset them. But what is it going to be?
yeah, it makes those programs where it's like top 10 films of all time, and no one's watching that program because they're waiting for like Peacemaker on Sky Max, but really you're not watching that at 2 in the morning. What was it like working on Alex Zane's funny rotten score?
Oh, Alex, bless him. I've known Alex not quite since I started. I started and I went pro very quickly. I was very lucky. And Alex was an open spot, sort of like the people who start being open spots when you've started getting paid work. So you're, as far as you're concerned, you're brand new, but they're even more brand new. And him and a friend of his, Richard Morris, who's a lovely guy and now a producer on News Quiz. So if he is listening, Richard, you still said you might put me on it. But but no, Richard had some lovely stand up, but Richard wanted to go into producing and is doing very well. Alex, always a very good looking boy. Alex was picked up by management quite early. He's very charismatic. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn and that he would agree with me. Incredibly lazy writer. He had a great set of jokes about. There was always a joke about Tyrannosaurus Rex having very camp arms, and something about. I seem to remember sort of a precursor of Briefcase from the In-Betweeners. He always his his case he took to school that he kept his gayness in, and it wasn't all making jokes about people being gay, but it was good. But it was like in 5 or 10 minutes, he got picked up by big management and fast tracked to presenting. He's a massive film buff, and that's what he does. So the thing about that was that then the TV, because then these sort of TV stations grew and they were like, oh, we're going to make this thing. And again, it was a case of knowing people going, oh, you're doing that? Oh, I'll do that. And it was filmed at the Century Club and wasn't quite the, I mean, not long before I'd done a show called The World Stands Up, which was a joint BBC America Channel 4, I think. So it was quite a lot of money and
Yeah,
uh, yeah, Dirty Rotten Comedians or whatever it was called was in a filmed in a private members club, and it was a lot more sort of on the hoof, and it was fine. It was great, but I did. I mean, we had to sort of sit around before and do like road stories, and and I was sat with another comic, and Alex was going, you know what it's like when, and I was going, mate. You stopped doing the circuit in about 2002, as soon as someone gave you enough money to sort of appear on telly. Um, and I don't think Alex would say he's a stand-up really, but again, he had the persona and the profile to get a TV show made.
yeah.
So I was absolutely delighted to do it, and it was fun to do. It was a good record, and I'll be honest with you, it was a lot better than the Jongleurs TV show I did in the basement of a terrible nightclub in the West End called Sway, which remains the worst TV I've ever done, and I'm very glad it never saw the light of day.
And but he's one of those people that you sort of recognize him from the panel shows 8 out of 10 cats, and you recognize him from what I believe to be Upin Frame, just slightly a little bit more edgy, rude tube. You sort of have, and you sort of now
Mm.
see him on the Sky programs where it's like on this film and whatever, and it's weird program because they don't air it at a sensible time. But it's one of the, but he is one of those people that I wouldn't have ever, you wouldn't have ever thought if you look at him now that
He
he was.
basically became a celebrity, and I mean, and not a huge celebrity, but enough of a celebrity. Because the other thing is, a lot of these programs want people who are funny, and you get someone like Johnny Vegas, who's just such one of the sweetest men you'll ever meet. And I saw him interviewed the other day, well, it's a long time ago now, about comedy, and he went, I don't really call myself a comedian anymore because it seems disrespectful to those who are, because he's an actor and he's a personality and he's brilliant. And I would go and watch him do stand up. I mean, one of the best gigs I ever did was with him. He was just absolutely astonishing. He finished the show at Up the Creek in Greenwich with his trousers around his ankles, standing on stage, necking a Guinness, singing New York, New York. And it was just, and Malcolm Hardy, the late great Malcolm Hardy, was MC. And afterwards, I just said to Malcolm, I went, that was astonishing. And some woman came up to me and went, I don't know what that was, but you should have headlined. And I'm like, well, each to their own. But the thing is, Alex benefited from being very charismatic, very quick-witted, and also, if you're going to have a panel show and go comedian, 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 whereas you can go presenter.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Alex. Funnily enough, I saw him. I ended up at a festival in Cardiff, I think it was, or Wembley, or some big, really big, like stadium gig, and it was a kind of lots of different bands coming on one after the other to do, and it was a bit poppy, and wasn't something I would have chosen to go to. I was given a ticket, but people had to fill between the bands,
Yeah.
and there were so many people who you can imagine who they were, who didn't have the chops to go. Right, I've got to keep talking for 5 minutes because they're setting up behind me. But are you having a good time? It's a nice day, and it was awful. Alex came on, and he had what he did. I remember. He went, we've got to fill time. I don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to count down from 100, and it was very funny because he had the sort of the stagecraft and the nous to do that, which he got from stand up. But I think with a lot of, I mean, I'm quite a purist. I will always be doing stand up,
Yeah.
much to my wife's annoyance. Yeah, there are a lot of the temptation to collect more money for traveling less is probably quite overwhelming. And if I suddenly picked up a big TV gig and didn't have to work as much on the circuit, I wouldn't work as much on the circuit. But I'm also very suspicious of not working enough on the circuit because then I feel that you lose your edge as a comic.
Yeah. And what are the other things you've worked on that when you sort of look into it, you get a little bit lost in the sense of it because you get confused because too many companies at one point or another have the same name as other companies and other organizations which are probably bigger than others have got similar names. So you get confused, but eventually you understand what's going on. What was it like working on the brilliant No Signal?
Oh, good Lord. That's a what you've gone right through my CV, haven't you? It reminds me actually of when I had to go to my old school to give out some prizes. And I always think it's that terrible thing American comedians have, which is kind of going, right, can you say that as featured on the Tonight Show, Comedy Central special, he's done, and they give you this CV, and you're like, mate, just go and do your gig, you know. And I was doing, so there's an old Bob Monkhouse line, which is the intro that every comedian should use, which is three things in your name,
Yeah,
right? And so if I do a corporate gig, for instance, they'll go, uh, twice nominated for Best Show at the Edinburgh Festival, just back from the New Zealand Comedy Festival, as heard on Breaking the News. And please welcome Alistair Barrie. If that, even then, that I think that's too long.
yeah.
Three things in your name. Because all you need to go is he's a comedian, he's been on something you've heard of, this is his name, right? And what you've got is, I did this thing at my school, and literally they went, "Oh, well, he's an old boy from the school." And they literally, it was about a 5 minute intro, like warm up on Jonathan Ross. He's a pit, and I was like, bloody hell, just say I've done warm up on Jonathan Ross, and that'll be enough. But no, they carried on for 10 minutes. So No Signal, which no one would have heard of, was a really, really good kind of, I think, ahead of its time, sketch show written by a guy called Pete Kane, lovely bloke, and another guy whose name I forget. And it was a kind of pastiche of cable TV that you switch between channels, and there was, America's greatest serial killer. And then I was the presenter of basically of a complete "Have I Got News for You" ripoff, and it was all very arch and sort of going, well, as the question master, here's an obvious question for you to knock down about the latest idiocy of the Prime Minister, and would cut to someone else going, well, yes, left-wing protest vote, and then and then someone else going, well, northern working class vote, and I really enjoyed it. I got paid quite nicely for it, as I remember as well. It was one of those shows that you kind of go, "Oh, I hope this goes somewhere because it's really good." And the guys making it did really, really their best. They gave it their best shot. And again, it was quite a new channel. They had some money. They threw the money at it. The channel didn't make enough money to bring it back. Sort of thing that if in a parallel universe, it's now on its 10th series, and I'm one of the regular cast members. But sadly, that's not what happened.
Yeah, and you sort of get it with those shows. Is the best example is that you have the UK version of the sketch show that Lee Mack did. Then you
Yeah.
have, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be get the country wrong, but I think it's in Quebec, which is in Canada, and it's a French-speaking area in Canada. I don't know why I'm explaining that. Everyone knows that. They're still running the sketch show, so it's still going. So their version
Well,
got
I
played.
mean, but again, it's like, I mean, really, there was a bit of you that goes, "Are they?" It's called The Sketch Show. I mean, you can't be more generic than that. I mean, if it's genuinely called The Sketch Show and they're still paying ITV for it, then ITV will be very happy because again, it's very difficult to do something new. Smack the Pony was amazing. Big Train. But they're all sketch show. I mean, you go back to my earliest memories. Not the 9 o'clock news was astonishing. Three of a kind, but they are sketch shows, and they've got little hooks like Three of a Kind was three people. Not the 9 o'clock news was vaguely topical, but it had Rowan Atkinson, so it could do no wrong. The sketch show was amazing. And then you had Tim Vine, you had Karen Taylor, who was a comedian when I started. Started together, and then she became an actor and stopped being a comedian. Kitty Flanagan, who is, to my mind, one of the best female comedians in the world, who is now quite a big TV star in Australia. So they're all. I mean, there's a show in Australia called Good News Week, which is a complete. It's so funny to watch how much of a rip off of I Got News and Mock the Week it is. They done just enough to avoid being sued is basically what they've done. Um, but yeah, the shows continue, and but when all said and done, there's sketch shows and there's stand up, and if you can think of something different, if you're the League of Gentlemen, jolly well done. But that's still a sitcom.
Yeah, and I think that you get all these shows and you sort of look at it going, that's a brilliant idea. So, for example, Thank God You're Here, which was an improvised thing where you walk through the blue door. All the other comedians, generically comedians, all know what's going on. They've all got the scripts. It's the one person. So Adam Hills has done it. So he walks through the door. He has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
He bumped in a scene, so it could be HM Rome, it could be a hospital, it could be a
Well, I mean that's an old improv game,
yeah,
and that doesn't make it bad, but it's not like a. But I think anything like anything needs a hook. I mean, I've done absolute pleasure talking to you, Tom, but I've done quite a few podcasts where people want to talk about, what it's been like to be a comedian for a couple of decades. But it's quite interesting, and I that's nothing wrong with that at all. But the ones that are really going to take off are things like, I mean, I did one the other day for a friend of mine, Tom Price,
yeah,
called "My Mate Bought a Toaster,"
brilliant.
which is it's a great podcast because it's your Amazon history,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's such a good hook
yeah,
to hang stuff off because you can trace your life through your purchases.
yeah,
I did another one for a guy called Kevin Ryan recently where I was the tyrant in charge of an island and I got to be supreme. And so it's almost like anything that gives you a reason to do it, if
yeah,
you see what I mean.
yeah,
And that's why that's what makes a really good sitcom
yeah.
podcast or panel show.
Yeah, and I think that the My Mate Bought a Toaster is really good, unless, and I think it was Josh Widdicombe that didn't have an Amazon history because he refuses to buy things off Amazon, and so Tom Price had to find all the other little shops that
How very Widdicombe. He'd
yeah,
just be there going, I decided I didn't want to put money into the hands of Jeff Bezos, and yeah, so I've actually got everything separately because I'm a huge Blur fan. Josh is another good mate, but it's
yeah,
not
who
surprised by that.
he sang Part Life on Radio 2 at the weekend.
Fun enough, I saw that online and was like, oh, he must be so happy.
He must be. He looks happy as well. And so, as we come towards the end of this interview, these slippery slopes we call the end, what upcoming projects that you've not been tied down by an NDA that you're allowed to talk about, that you're happy for people excited is the word I use, excited for people to hear slash see?
Well, I'm very excited to be going to Inverness on Thursday, but that's a corporate, so I don't think anyone needs to know about that. I've got a writing thing that I'm looking at, which I don't want to banjax by mentioning it, but a more long form of writing. But basically, a couple of years ago, I did Edinburgh and then toured the show and did my second special, and that went really well. And I had very pleased with the special. It's done very well on ITV. Um, and I thought last year I was going to do the same thing. I thought, right, go to Edinburgh, tour. And basically, life caught up with me. I've got two young kids who are both they're fine, but they're both SEN, so they need a bit more support. And my wife is incredible, but we're both technically involved in parenting.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I know this is not terribly rock and roll, but I had a lot of work to do around the house. And I rebuilt the front of my house and rebuilt my front garden, from which I gained an enormous amount of satisfaction. But it did mean I didn't do Edinburgh 24 or 25.
Yeah.
Um, I could have done it this year. I vaguely looked at doing it. Edinburgh is not what it was in terms of, oh, you have to go to Edinburgh. But I think for someone of my vintage, it's a very good way to make sure you've got a tour show together. So I've got a show,
Yeah.
not absolutely ready to go, but I've got more than enough material that if you ask me to go and do it tomorrow, it would be a pretty good show. So the main thing is that next year, looking at really starting to get that honed. And the other thing is the tour that I did was quite last minute because the Edinburgh went really well. So I threw it together myself essentially because the margins are not big enough at that end of touring to really start going. Producers come up to me and go, I'd like to tour you, but we've all got to make money and I don't make enough for them. But now, excuse me, now I'm in a position to go, right. I did a couple of gigs this weekend and was like, if I do a tour show, would you want me to come here? And they were like, yes, please. So what's really coming up next year is one big writing project, but whether I have time to do that at the same time as really getting my new show together, we shall find out.
And so, there we have it, another lovely, extraordinary, excellent, and dictionary defining interview. Yes, as I keep on saying, I've given up on eating the modern dictionary. It's too thick. So I'm now eating the 1904 dictionary that's got about 3 words, and it's very thin and very editable. And I always try and track down somebody and tell her to eat it, but she probably eats too much corn for her breakfast instead of eating what she's supposed to be eating, which is her ABCs, because it's easy as 1, 2, 3. So, thank you guys for watching, and thank you for letting me interview you.
My pleasure, mate.
And thank you guys for watching. There'll be more interviews from me because you can never get away from me. I own 26 YouTube channels. You'll never get away from me.
You own 26 YouTube channels.
Yes, yes. I also run them as well. I don't just buy YouTube channels.
So it's all your fault, basically.
Yes, it's all my fault. There'll be more interviews from me across all my channels. Thank you guys for watching. Bye bye.